Hi class, Mrs. Calvi here. Just a quick review on rounding. The first thing I want to do is go over what the place values are called. So if we look here, if you notice I have my decimal here. Any place value to the right of my decimal point, the place values have the letters THS at the end. So THS, THS. So the first place value is the tenths. So a lot of students get confused as to how to spell these. You're literally spelling them the same as the left side of the decimal, except for you're adding THS at the end. So just how this is the tens place, this is going to be the tenths place. So add THS. Then the hundredths, then the thousandths, then it would be 10,000ths, all right? But the one thing you have to remember is that to the right of the decimal, we have THS at the end of all of the place values. If you notice, in the beginning of that, it is 10, 100, 1,000. A lot of students, for some reason, don't feel like when you say the word hundredths that there's a D there, but there is. You're spelling it just as you would on the left side of the decimal. So on the left side, first place value is the ones, then the tens, hundreds, thousands, then it would be 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, okay? I didn't have enough space to write everything. All right, so I want to practice rounding because I feel like some of us still haven't mastered rounding, and I think that's something really important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down a number, and we are going to practice with rounding to different place values. So I have the number 11,148, and I want to round to the 10,000s place. 10,000s, all right? So ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000. So I'm going to underline the place value that I want to round to. So I'm underlining that one. I'm going to draw an arrow to the number that is next to it. If this number that the arrow is pointing to, if that number is a 5 or higher, the number that you underlined goes up by 1. Now, if the number that your arrow is pointing to, if it is less than 5, the number you underlined stays the same. Everything to the right of what you underline becomes a 0. Okay, so in this case, the number that my arrow is pointing to is less than 5, so this 1 stays, and everything to the right of what I underline becomes a 0. So I said that my number stayed, my 1 stayed, everything to the right of what I underline becomes a 0. So 11,148 rounded to the 10,000s place gets rounded to 10,000, okay? Okay, so I have this number here, 4 million. So when I say a number, whenever I see a comma, that's where the place value word comes in. So 4,625,891. Now I want to round to the hundreds place. So hundreds place, ones, tens, hundreds. So I'm going to underline my 8. I'm going to draw my arrow to the 9. This 9, it's a 5 or higher, so that tells me the number I underlined has to go up 1. Everything to the left is staying. This is going up 1, and everything to the right of what I underlined becomes a 0. So the 4 stays, the 6 stays, the 2 stays, the 5 stays. The 8 now becomes a 9 because this 9 told me this had to go up 1. And then everything to the right of what I underline becomes a 0. So those last 2 digits become zeros. So my answer was rounded to 4,625,900. So remember, every time you see a comma, that's where you say the place value word. 4,625,900. Okay, let's try one with a decimal now. Okay, so here I have 38 and. Whenever I see a decimal point, I say the word and. So 38 and 432, and whatever place value that 2 is in, that's the place value you state. This 2 is in the thousandths place, so it's the thousands place. So again, I would read this number as 38 and 432 thousandths. All right. Now I want to round to the hundredths place. So tenths, thousandths, hundredths, right? Or always going from at your decimal place, I always start technically here, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and I want to round to the hundredths place. So I'm going to underline my 3, draw my arrow to my 2. Well, my 2 is telling me that my 3 is going to stay the same. Everything to the right of what I underline is going to become a 0. Everything to the left of what I underline stays the same. So my 3 stays, my 8 stays, my decimal stays, my 4 stays. My 3 is staying a 3 because this was not a 5 or higher. So that 3 stays, and everything to the right would become a 0. Now, the one thing about decimals, if we are rounding and I'm rounding to a place value that is to the right of my decimal, so anything with a THS at the end, if I said to round to the hundredths place, that's the last digit I should have in my rounded. I technically I do not need that 0, okay? So we need to get used to, even though technically we always put zeros to the right of what we underline, in decimals we don't need it. So my final answer would be 38 and 43 hundredths because I said I wanted to round to the hundredths place. So that should really be the last place value I see. Okay. Now, these two numbers are the same. So 38.430 and 38.43 have the same value. You say them differently. This is 38 and 43 hundredths. This one is 38 and 430 thousandths. You say them differently, but they have the same value. They are equal to each other. You just don't need that 0 at the end. Okay? Okay, last one. So 168 and 763 thousandths. So I'm going to round to the tenths place, So I'm going to look at my decimal, start right here, tenths. That's what I'm rounding to. So I'm going to underline the place value that I'm rounding to, draw my arrow to the right. This 6 tells me this 7 has to become an 8, okay? Everything to the left of my decimal stays the same. And remember what I just said. If I'm rounding to the tenths place here, that's the last digit I should have after rounding in my answer. So again, the 1 is going to stay, the 6 stays, the 8 stays, the decimal stays. The 6 tells me that this 7 becomes an 8. Now, I'm not going to put zeros to the right because it's not necessary with a decimal. If they're telling me to round to the tenths place, the last digit in my answer should be the tenths place, which it is. The 8 here is in the tenths place. So my answer was rounded to 168 and 8 tenths. Okay, guys, I hope this was a helpful reminder, and I will talk to you soon.